Before we start, make sure you subscribe and like this video. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and this happened last October. The weather was turning colder, and it had been raining constantly for several days. I didn't mind since I worked from home. On this particular day, I got up early and started work. But around 1 p.m., my Zoom meeting was interrupted by a power outage. I knew it was the entire house, and not just my computer, because all the lights went out. I quickly grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and went to the window to see if my neighbors were affected. It was really dark outside due to the clouds and heavy rain, but all the nearby houses still had their lights on. I started to worry that something was wrong with my house. I left my office and went downstairs, grabbing a better flashlight before heading to the unfinished basement. Maneuvering through the dark and around my stacked storage boxes, I reached the electrical panel and saw that the main power switch was in the off position. Although I'm not very experienced with electrical issues, I knew that the switches usually just become loose and don't fully push the other way. I flicked the main switch back on, and everything immediately powered up again. I closed the electrical panel, went back upstairs, and waited for the internet to reconnect before rejoining the Zoom call and resuming work. I stayed at my desk for the rest of the afternoon, working late to prepare a presentation for the next day. I didn't close my computer until 8 p.m. The storm was just as fierce, and it was much darker outside. Every flash of lightning lit up the room. I got up from my desk and opened my office door, but as I left the room, I heard some thumps from downstairs. I assumed it was just the wind or something hitting the house, but as I reached the bottom of the stairs, the power went out again, startling me. I stood there for a moment, listening for any noises that might explain the outage, but aside from the rain and thunder, it was silent. Even the thumps I had heard moments ago had stopped. I retrieved the flashlight again and headed to the basement. As I descended, the sound of the storm was louder than expected, echoing through the room in a way it hadn't before. I shined the flashlight around and moved through the boxes toward the electrical panel. On the floor beneath it was a puddle of water. Shocked, I didn't immediately realize what it meant. I moved closer and saw more wet spots on the concrete floor. Before my light revealed a few stacked boxes. Above them, the window well was open and water was flowing down the wall into the basement. My heart raced when I noticed muddy shoe prints on the top of the boxes, as if someone had used them to climb in and out of the window well. Terrified, I spun around, flashing my light around the basement, fearing someone was hiding there. I sprinted up the stairs and locked myself in my car before calling the police. They arrived 10 minutes later, searched the house, and found no one. They did confirm that someone had broken in, finding undone screws on the window well. They secured it to prevent more flooding, but after giving my statement, they told me to update them if I had any new information. I'm left with no idea who broke in or what they were trying to do. It's unsettling to think that when they shut off the power earlier, they were probably in my basement, just a few feet from me, hiding in the dark. They might have been in my house for hours, and I still have no clue why. In 2019, I took a trip to northern Wisconsin and stayed in an Airbnb cabin located in the woods near the Canada-US border. It was part of a park with similar cabins, likely owned by the same person. Although I wasn't far from town, just 10 minutes from the nearest store, The immediate area around the cabin was very secluded. Each cabin had its own trail leading to it. For the first couple of days, I stayed by myself, either inside or walking the trails. After that, I got bored and decided to hang out at the park center with others staying in the cabins. The park center had charcoal grills, fire pits, and benches. Every time I passed it, groups of people were having a good time, so I decided to join them. I arrived around 5 p.m. and quickly met a couple of cool guys. We shared some beers and chatted by the fire pit. It was just us for a while, but around sundown, another guy showed up. We offered him some drinks and let him join us, but I immediately felt something was off about him. He wasn't talking much and didn't seem to enjoy himself. Given that this park was for vacationers, it was odd that he looked so tired and unhappy. It killed the mood, but none of us wanted to tell him to leave. Eventually, the other guys left, leaving just me and him. I put out the fire and said I was heading back for the night. He stayed sitting, staring at me with a tired look. I turned and walked away, not saying anything else. As I walked down the trail, I looked back a few times and saw him still watching me, though he looked away whenever I noticed. Fortunately, the trail to my cabin was well lit, and I didn't think he followed me. I got back inside, took a quick shower, and sat in the living room for about 15 minutes before going to bed. After the few beers, I passed out right away. I woke up in a blur, confused, and rolled over to look at the clock, only to see a man standing in the open doorway. I could only see his figure in the moonlight, but I recognized his voice as the guy from the fire pit when he spoke. "I need to stay here." Terrified and frozen, I tried to ask what he meant, but could only stutter. He repeated, "I need to stay here." More harshly, I quickly said, "Okay," not knowing what else to do. He looked exhausted, with sweat dripping from his face. After a few moments, he stepped back into the hallway, giving me space to leave, but holding his left hand stiffly to his side, as if hiding something. I walked past him carefully, and as I got around the corner, I saw him still standing there, watching me. Once outside, I ran down the trail and found a group at the park center. They called 911 for me, and a few minutes later, the police arrived and found the man still standing in the hallway, holding a knife in his left hand. At the station, his answers didn't make sense, and he seemed unstable, so it was all attributed to insanity. I'm thankful that something made him let me go before anything worse happened. I live in a duplex in a small community. I have been here for over a year, and there hasn't been much to complain about. The neighbors sharing a wall with me moved out a month after I moved in, and no one has rented it since, so it feels like I have the place to myself. One night, after getting off work at 10 p.m., I picked up some fast food and went home. I turned on the TV and ate dinner on the couch. While eating, I heard a quiet thud behind me. I turned and looked at the wall connecting my duplex to the empty unit. The thud happened again. I muted the TV and looked out the window, but there were no cars or moving trucks outside, and the other unit's lights were off. I went back to the wall and pressed my ear against it. I could hear muffled footsteps and doors opening and closing, as if someone was inspecting the place. It was odd since the unit had been empty for over a year, and it was almost 11 p.m. I went back to the couch and continued watching TV, staying up until about 1 a.m. before going to bed. As I tried to fall asleep, I heard the same noise again, louder this time. I got up and walked to the bedroom door, but before opening it, I heard soft footsteps downstairs. A chill ran through me. I stepped away from the door and quietly grabbed my phone, lowering the volume and calling the police, whispering my address to the operator. As I explained the situation, a shadow appeared under the door. I stopped talking, staring at the door, while the person on the other side paced back and forth. They seemed to know I was in the room. Please subscribe and like the video. Also comment your favorite horror movie so I can stay motivated to upload more videos like this.